Hello and welcome to this V-Ray presentation for Maya. My name is Veso, I'm a 3D artist at Chaos Group, and I'll guide you through this demonstration showing you all the new features in V-Ray 3.5 for Maya. You can ask questions in the chat while this presentation is going, and my colleagues will do their best to answer them. Let's take a quick look at what's new and what are the key features in this new service pack. V-Ray 3.5 is packed with great new features and improvements. Here in the overview you can see a list of all the topics I'm going to cover with you guys. Some of them are improvements of old features and some are brand new features that I'm really excited to introduce to you. One of the highlights in this release is without a question the new adaptive lights algorithm, which significantly speeds up the rendering process, especially noticeable in scenes with many light sources. Another highlight is the resumable rendering feature, which allows to pause your render and continue at a later moment. Also, this service pack has many IPR improvements and many GPU improvements as well. That being said, let's get started exploring all those great features together. Our first stop is the new lighting algorithm called Adaptive Lights. Originally designed to work on the GPU, now it's implemented on the CPU as well. The Adaptive Lights algorithm is a smart, unbiased method of evaluating all of the lights in the scene and their contribution to the objects in the scene. This way the algorithm picks only the necessary lights needed for a certain area. This sort of smart picking and managing the lighting information results in a significant speed improvement. In fact, the more light sources you have in your scene, the greater the speed boost will be. I'm sure some of you guys have experienced difficulties in the past trying to render scenes containing hundreds of light sources. Using the new adaptive lights should sort that problem out for you. We have conducted tests with 10, 20 and even 100,000 light sources in a scene, and the Adaptive Lights algorithm handles it with no problem. And again, this feature works on both the CPU and the GPU. Now, let me show you a quick side-by-side comparison. On the left-hand side, we've used the full light evaluation method, and on the right-hand side, we are going to use the new adaptive lights. This particular scene contains over 100 light sources. Clearly, we can see a dramatic speed improvement. With the new adaptive lights on, the scene had rendered twice as fast compared to the full light evaluation method. If you'd like to get more in-depth information about the adaptive lights, you could visit labs.chaosgroup.com website and find the Understanding Adaptive Lights article, which explains in a little bit more detail about the algorithm and also provides comparisons to the probabilistic lights and full lights evaluation methods. All great information there, so don't hesitate to take a look. The V-Ray frame buffer is a great tool, giving us the ability to make quick color corrections and add lens effects to our renders to make them prettier. As a version 3.5 of V-Ray for Maya, we have interactive lens effects added to the V-Ray frame buffer. This feature gives us the ability to play with the lens effects settings while the rendering process is still ongoing. Let me show you really quick how the interactive lens effects work. Currently, my scene is still rendering. Let's open up the Lens Effects panel, and without the need to stop the render or wait for it to finish, we can enable the bloom effect and interactively make adjustments until we are happy with the results. By the way, a quick note here, since probably some of you are wondering about the computer specs of the computer that I'm using for this demonstration. It's equipped with an i7 6800K processor with a 32 gigs of RAM, GTX 770 and a Quadro P5000. Let's turn the glare effect as well. The interactive lens effects are hardware accelerated and you won't get a performance hits on the rendering part while experimenting with them. In this release, there are a number of improvements regarding the interactive production rendering mode, or in short, the IPR. On the performance side, it requires less time to start when activated, also stops immediately when the stop button is pressed, and it uses less memory compared to older versions of V-Ray. On the functionality side, there are several new features added to the IPR, which I'm eager to show you. So without losing any more time, let me jump right back in Maya and show you those great new features. Let's open up a more appropriate scene for the purpose. Once we have it loaded, let's open the V-Ray frame buffer window, and right away you can notice a new button located next to the stop button. This new conveniently located button starts the IPR. Another small but very handy feature that's been added is the ability to choose the camera you'd like to render from right inside the frame buffer. When you right-click the IPR button, what you get is a drop-down menu letting you select the camera you want to render from. This also works on the production render button as well. Let's start the IPR from the render camera. Now, once the IPR has started, the icon changes to a pause button. Imagine we need our computing power for another task at the moment. We can easily press the pause button and do whatever we need to be done. Once we are ready to continue rendering, we can simply unpause it. The IPR would continue to render from exactly where it left off while applying all the changes to the scene we've made while the IPR was paused. I'd like to show you several new features of the frame buffer while using the IPR. If you right-click anywhere in the rendering area, you'll get this drop-down menu. As you can notice, there are three new options here: select object, select material, and set focus point. Let me walk you through each one of them. Select object lets you select a scene object right from the V-Ray frame buffer. Let me move the frame buffer to the side so you can see. Select material is a very handy feature. It shows you the material of the object you clicked on in the frame buffer. Very easily you can click on an object you'd like to change the color of, for instance, and do so. The third option we have here is set focus point, a very neat feature which allows you to change the camera focus by clicking on a point where you want it to focus. For this to work, you'd have to have the depth of field enabled on your physical camera, or if you don't use a physical camera, you can enable the depth of field from the render settings override tab. Let me open the render settings. Alright, let's stop the rendering for a moment, and while we are here in the render settings, let's take a quick look at the new features added to this service pack. If we go to the Render Elements tab, we can see a list of all the render elements we have added. Directly below the render elements list, there is a new checkbox allowing you to enable or disable all of the render elements at once in IPR mode. Imagine you're still in look development and you don't need the render elements at the moment. You can simply disable them all in IPR instead of going through the list and manually turn off each individual one. Another useful functionality that's been added is the reset V-Ray frame buffer. The V-Ray frame buffer can be mislocated when opening a scene that's been saved with a different monitor setup. Let me try to simulate a similar situation. I'll try to move my frame buffer out of the viewing area. And now if I click on the Reset V-Ray VFB button, the frame buffer will reappear on the screen. Very handy feature if you open a scene with the VFB missing. Lastly, while we are still in the render settings, let me show you a new addition to the render masks. If we click on the drop-down menu, right at the bottom, there is an Isolate Select option. Let me select it so we can see what it does. By the way, this feature works on both IPR and production mode on the CPU and the GPU. Let's start the IPR, select the object from the scene, and go into Isolate Selection mode. Now only the isolated object is being rendered. Extremely useful feature for working on a specific piece of the scene without re-rendering the whole image when a change is made. Here we can change the color, for example, and only the isolated object would update in the frame buffer. Next, we have distributed rendering improvements. As of this release, we can add render nodes while rendering, meaning there is no need to stop the rendering process. Add some render nodes and start again from the beginning. Now we can add them on the fly. This feature works on both IPR and production rendering mode. Let me jump to Maya really quick to demonstrate how this cool feature works. Let me exit isolate mode and disable my render mask. Also turn on my depth of field. Let me start rendering. In fact, let me start rendering in bucket mode. And now if I want to add some render nodes, I can go to the settings and then under settings, select all the render nodes I want to add and just enable them. And here we go. Now we have some help from additional computers. Another brand new feature of this service pack is the resumable rendering. It's been requested by many users and now it's included in this service pack. The resumable rendering is very useful in situations when, for whatever reason, we need to stop rendering and use the computer for something else. In this sort of situation, up until now, we had to start rendering from the beginning. Now, however, thanks to the resumable rendering option, we can continue rendering from exactly where we left off. This is a great time saver and gives the user a certain amount of flexibility. In my opinion, it's great to have the ability to pause your render and do whatever needs to be done instead of waiting for hours in some situations until you can use your computer again. Let's go back to our scene and see how this feature works. In the Common tab, we now have a resumable rendering checkbox. Let's turn it on. We need to give it a name and set the image format to VR image. The resumable rendering feature works in both bucket and progressive mode. For this demonstration, let's choose bucket and set the noise threshold to a higher value so it renders faster. If we stop the rendering now, we can use the computer power for another task. We can even close Maya, shut down the computer, and when we come back and press the render button again, it will continue rendering from exactly the place we stopped it. As you guys would agree, creating characters has always been quite a challenging process. One of the most challenging parts is creating the skin of the character. No matter if you are going for stylized or realistic look, character skin is essential to get right. In V-Ray, you can use the skin material or the SSS material to achieve the look you desire. Now in V-Ray 3.5, we have added support for the AO Surface shader, which is an open source shader written by Anders Langland. This shader is known in the CG community for delivering pretty good results when it comes to creating realistic looking skin. Let me quickly demonstrate to you how it works inside Maya. We can create a new V-Ray AO surface material from the list and assign it to the character's head. Let's take a look at some of its settings first. On the very top, we have the SSS density scale parameter, which is a multiplier for all the SSS layers radiuses. Right underneath is the bump map slot. We can plug in a bump map or a normal map in here. Also control the strength amount. Next, we have our diffuse parameters and also the SSS mix parameter, which allows for turning on and off the subsurface scattering of the material. After that, we have 3 SSS layers for controlling the subsurface scattering. All of their parameters can be mapped with a texture. And in the end, we have 2 reflection layers. As you can notice, the reflection layers have their separate bump map slots, which gives you further flexibility and control over the reflections of the material. Let me assign this material to our character and start the IPR. I'll draw a region around the head, since that's where I'm going to be focusing on. Also, you can use the new Isolate Select Render mask that I've shown earlier for the same purpose. In the reflection settings, we have reflection roughness parameter. The roughness parameter is like the inverted reflection glossiness parameter from the V-Ray skin material. What I mean by that is that the smaller values would make the reflection sharper, thus the material would look shiny, and higher values would make the reflections blurrier and the material would appear rough looking. Let's turn on the subsurface scattering by setting the SSS mix to 1. If we increase the SSS radius, we'll start to see the subsurface scattering more in the thin geometry parts, like the character's ears. We can also plug a texture instead of a flat color. Also, I have prepared a texture for the diffuse to give our character's skin a little bit of color and variation. Of course, in this example, I'm going for stylized look and feel because of the cartoony nature of this particular character. You can use this shader to create realistic skin as well, and many more materials. As you all know, every material has a Fresnel value, which is indicated by its index of refraction, or the so-called IOR. This value shows how much of the light is reflected off the surface, and how much is absorbed. Surface normals pointing away from the camera reflect more light compared to those that are facing the camera. In this service pack, there has been an improvement added to the Fresnel effect called glossy Fresnel. Now the Fresnel effect of the material is also being affected by its glossiness, which makes it more accurate. Let me show you a couple of images with and without glossy Fresnel and do a quick back and forth comparison. As you can see, there is a slight but definitely visible difference between the two. Glossy Fresnel is turned on by default, except for the cases when you open an older scene. In that situation, glossy Fresnel would be turned off so you wouldn't have any visual differences. If you'd like to find out more about the glossy Fresnel, you can check out the Understanding Glossy Fresnel article on our labs.chaosgroup.com website. A more in-depth information with lots of examples and comparisons. It's worth taking a look. Since version 3.0 of V-Ray, our GPU team has been working around the clock to expand the feature list and provide you guys with a fully featured GPU rendering experience. Version 3.5 of V-Ray is no exception. There's been a lot of features added again and I'm very excited to show them to you. So without losing any more time, let's jump straight through them. When it comes to rendering on the GPU, you might end up in a situation when you run out of video memory. That is where the new on-demand mipmapping feature comes in really handy. What it does is actually save memory by smartly choosing when to resize a texture and when to use its full resolution. V-Ray is well aware of how far each object is located in relation to the camera. Using this information, V-Ray resizes textures of the objects far away from the camera or objects that occupy just a few pixels on the screen. This optimization results in great memory savings without losing any quality. You don't really have to do any prep work. All you need to do is enable on-demand mipmapping option and let V-Ray do the rest. Let me show you a side-by-side comparison of the on-demand mipmapping feature on and off. As you can see here, no difference in the quality of the render, but great difference in the video memory usage. Another great optimization that's been added to V-Ray 3.5 for Maya is faster rendering of V-Ray materials on the GPU. I have rendered a scene for approximately 10 minutes with V-Ray 3.4 and then rendered the same scene with V-Ray 3.5. Let me show you the results I've got and you'll clearly see the difference. This is an image rendered with V-Ray 3.4 for 10 minutes. And next we have the same scene in 3.5 with much less noise in the materials. And here is side by side. The difference is very clear, cleaner results in less time. One of the latest features, the V-Ray stochastic flakes, has now been added for GPU rendering as well. The stochastic flakes material is used for creating car paint, snow, sand, nail polish, and so on. Basically every material that has sparkly flakes in it, it's a good candidate. Now let me jump right in Maya and show you how you can use the stochastic flakes material to create car paint and render it on the GPU. Let me create a new stochastic material and plug it into the code layer. Those are the default settings that you get when you create a new stochastic material. As you can see, the flakes are white by default. Let me change the color to red. Also, I'll increase the number of flakes a little bit. The highlight glossiness parameter determines the orientation of the flakes. Numbers close to 1 will make the flakes oriented along the surface normals, and lower values would randomize their orientation. Let's lower it a little bit. 0.6 is a good value. The blur angle controls the softening of the flakes. And lastly, let's change the scale of the flakes. I'll go for something like 50. Right underneath the base parameters, we have an option to use colored flakes. In the drop-down menu, there are options for using random hue or a custom map. A custom map you can use in a case you want only specific colors, for example. And a random hue would use the whole color wheel. Down here I have prepared one such stochastic material with random colored flakes driven by the random hue option. I'll plug it in the next coat layer of the blend material. And this is pretty much how I've set up my car paint material. We can of course use the V-Ray flakes material, but the benefit of using the stochastic material is that it's physically more accurate, requires less memory, it's procedurally generated, and you can make random colored flakes. If you'd like to know more about the stochastic flakes, you can visit our docs.chaosgroup.com website, find the stochastic flakes material, and right at the bottom you can find an article introduced on SIGGRAPH 2016 about the stochastic flakes by Chaos Group. Next, we have the V-Ray Clipper, an excellent tool for cutaways and sections at render time. Absolutely non-destructive in terms of geometry. It's been very popular ever since it came out, and now it's also supported on the GPU. Let me open a scene I have prepared to show you how the V-Ray Clipper works. When we select the Clipper object, we can simply enable it. The V-Ray Clipper would by default cut through all the geometry. We can exclude some of the objects from being clipped, which I'll show you in a minute. First, let's take a look at the clipper itself. We can assign a material to it and change the color of the cut part. We can also check the Use Object Material checkbox and use the materials of the objects themselves. Also, we can exclude some objects if we'd like to achieve more interesting results. Personally, one of my favorite features of V-Ray is aerial perspective. This relatively new feature simulates a naturally looking and realistic atmospheric depth. It's absolutely great for rendering exteriors, and once you start using it, you can't imagine going without it. The best of all is that it comes very cheap in terms of render time and performance. The good news is that as a version 3.5 of V-Ray for Maya, aerial perspective is now supported in GPU rendering as well. Let me open up a scene in Maya and show you how easy it is to use the aerial perspective on the GPU. Let's set the rendering engine to CUDA and start the IPR. Let's adjust the visibility range so we can see more of the fog or less of the fog. Aerial perspective effect works together with the sun and sky to approximate an atmospheric effect. Let's also turn on the effect environment rays so the effect would be applied on the rays that hit the sky. We also have a filter color which allows us to tint the color of the effect and have more artistic freedom. Beside the GPU features and improvements I've shown you so far, there is actually more to the list. support has been added for additive mode in V-Ray blend material. Also, velocity and render ID and the atmosphere render elements are now supported as well. Render masks, cached irradiance maps, and also light directionality is now supported, which is very useful. Again, a lot of great features and improvements have been added to the GPU rendering in this service pack. Many people are using multiple 3D softwares in their pipeline. In such cases, it is essential to have a quick and easy way to exchange assets between different applications. Let's take a quick look at the V-Ray Scene Manager in V-Ray 3.5 for Maya. If you're familiar with the V-Ray Scene Manager, you'll notice that it has a new UI and also some new functionality. Let me export a V-Ray scene from 3ds Max and import it here in Maya so we can see how it works. In 3ds Max, it's very easy and straightforward process to export a VR scene. Let's render the scene before we export it so we can compare the results later. Just right-click in the viewport and select Export VR Scene from the list. Let's name it and go back to Maya. In Maya, we open the V-Ray Scene Manager from the V-Ray toolbar. Import objects and choose the scene we've just exported from 3ds Max. We hit the render button, and you can see that very easily we've managed with a couple of clicks really to transfer this whole scene from one application to another. If you'd like to find out more in-depth information about V-Ray scene sharing, you can go to labs.chaosgroup.com and find the article named How to Move V-Ray Scenes Between Applications. Very interesting article, a lot of useful information out there. Additionally, in V-Ray 3.5, the material swatches in the Hypershade as well as the material viewer preview are improved in terms of speed. Also, support has been added for X-Gen interactive Grumbo splines. Let me show you a side-by-side comparison of how much faster material swatches are loading in the Hypershade in V-Ray 3.5 compared to V-Ray 3.4. With V-Ray 3.5 for Maya comes a new online licensing system. Up until now, the V-Ray license was obtained through a dongle, but now we can obtain our license anytime, anywhere, as long as we have internet connection. Existing users that have a dongle can still use it, no need to get rid of it just yet. This is a screenshot from the new online license system. Here you can see all the online licenses that you have. Also the dongle licenses. If you don't have internet connection, you can also borrow a license by clicking on the offline licensing. Your licenses will be activated immediately upon order processing. Again, no physical dongle. It's currently available for new license purchases only. I'd like to mention another product of ours, the VRS Scans. This is a technology for scanning real-world materials. The scanning technology captures the whole appearance of the material, the texture data, and the material's response to light. All of this data is conveniently packed into a material that the end user can use with ease to achieve photorealistic results. No additional tweaking is required. The scanned material is always accurate in its appearance and response to light. We can scan a wide variety of materials such as fabrics, metals, wood, different car paints, and so on. Here is a scanned material of a car paint. You can see how the flakes react to light. And here you can see several scans of wood material, just plain wood and the same material with one layer of coat. And after that, 2 layers of clear coat. If you're interested in the VRS Scans technology, you can find out more information on our website, chaosgroup.com/VRScans. Also, we offer a material library consisting of more than 500 materials. It's constantly growing. So if you find this stuff interesting, you can register for a 30-day free trial and test the VRS Scans yourself. In V-Ray 3.5, there's been some improvements added to the VRS Scans. The users get more control over the material. Thanks to the paint color option, we can now change the overall color of the material and keep all of its properties and light behavior. Alright guys, we are getting to the end of this presentation. To summarize all we have covered until now, in V-Ray 3.5 for Maya, we get a significant rendering speed boost thanks to the new adaptive lights algorithm, a lot of improvements of the interactive production rendering, added resumable rendering option, many V-Ray frame buffer improvements and new features, select objects and materials directly from the VFB, also changed the focus point directly from the VFB, many GPU improvements as well, stochastic flakes material, V-Ray clipper, aerial perspective, all of those you can render now on the GPU. Also the new online licensing system giving us the opportunity to obtain a license anywhere, anytime we want. A quick note on the pricing for monthly rentals. Monthly rentals now cost 50% less. Also, there is a bundle options. You can get V-Ray for Maya together with Phoenix FD, which is Chaos Group's fluid dynamic simulation software. You can get 20% discount on new purchases and 39% discount on updates for existing users. For more information and details, contact your local reseller or send an email to sales@chaosgroup.com. If you guys find V-Ray for Maya interesting, join the V-Ray community to keep up to date with information. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, also subscribe to our YouTube channel, Chaos Group TV. If you'd like to try the new V-Ray 3.5, you can download a free, fully featured 30-day trial from our website. Thank you for taking the time to be part of this presentation. I hope it has been interesting and helpful for you. For more information about all of our products, again, chaosgroup.com. Also, you can find the documentation for each individual product at docs.chaosgroup.com. Lots of info and examples on there. For video tutorials and demo videos, check out our YouTube channel, Chaos Group TV. Again, thank you guys for being part of this webinar and have a nice day.